I pushed my husband down the stairs when I discovered he was faking paralysis to cheat with the nurse we hired. No regrets. His life ended, mine blossomed. Good morning, my dears. My name is Teresa Sanders. I'm 78 years old, and I'm going to tell you a story that changed my life forever. A story of betrayal, pain, and most importantly, rebirth. Before I begin, if you're enjoying this type of content, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to receive more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's listening to these intimate memories I share. It was 1965. I was only 27 years old. The world was very different then. You can't imagine. Women like me had to be, above all else, good wives and mothers. Our dreams and desires always came after those of our family. And I accepted this without question, because that's how I was raised. I lived in Riverdale, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, one of those places where everyone knows everyone. I had been married for 7 years to Albert Sanders, a respected businessman who owned the largest fabric store in town. At that time, we had 3 young children: Diana, 6 years old, Jason, 4, and my youngest, Catherine, who had just turned 2. Our house was beautiful, the nicest one on the street. It had 2 floors, a large porch, and a backyard with apple trees that delighted the children. From the outside, we were the perfect family. Albert was considered a good husband, hard-working, and I was seen as a lucky woman, if only they knew. Everything changed one Sunday afternoon. Albert was returning from a business trip to Philadelphia when he had a car accident. The car rolled over several times on the dirt road. By some miracle, he survived, but when he arrived at the only hospital in town, he couldn't move his legs. Dr. Andrews, the doctor who treated him, said he had suffered a spinal injury, but with complete rest and physical therapy perhaps, and he emphasized this perhaps, he could regain movement over time. "We can't guarantee anything, Mrs. Sanders," he told me in that hospital corridor with the smell of ether. "Medicine still has a long way to go in this area, but there is hope. Hope." It was with that word that I reorganized my entire life. I transformed our living room into a bedroom for Albert, since he couldn't climb the stairs to our bedroom. I learned to clean and turn him in bed to prevent bed sores. I learned to bathe him, change adult diapers, administer medications. All this while caring for 3 small children and the house. The savings we had soon began to dwindle. Albert could no longer work at the store, which was now managed by his brother, Jerome, who didn't have the same business acumen. Our income decreased dramatically. After 3 exhausting months, I realized I couldn't handle everything alone. The children were being neglected. I was sleeping only 3 or 4 hours a night, and my health was beginning to deteriorate. That's when Mrs. Ethel, our neighbor, suggested we hire Nancy, a 23-year-old nurse who had recently moved to town. "She's trained in the city, Teresa. She knows special exercises that might help your husband recover his movement, and the price is fair." With the little money we still had saved, I hired Nancy to come 5 hours a day, 3 times a week. She seemed like an angel sent from heaven. Beautiful, yes. She was very beautiful, with those long brown hair and green eyes, but mainly competent and dedicated. Albert, who was always complaining about my clumsy care, seemed calmer when she was around. Nancy began doing special exercises with Albert's legs, therapeutic massages, and supervising his diet. "We need to strengthen the body so it can respond better," she would say with that sweet, professional voice. With Nancy taking care of Albert for a few hours each day, I was able to devote more time to my children and even started sewing for others to supplement our income. It seemed like we were finally finding a balance in that difficult situation. It was on a Wednesday. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The sky was heavy, announcing a storm. I had taken Catherine to Dr. Andrews because she had a persistent fever. The appointment ended earlier than expected because the doctor was called for an emergency. I returned home without notice at the time when Nancy should have been applying exercises to Albert. When I entered, the house was strangely quiet. I placed Catherine, who had fallen asleep on the way, on the kitchen sofa, and headed toward the living room where Albert's bed was located. The door was ajar. That's when I heard laughter, muffled laughter, and whispers. I approached quietly, my heart already guessing what my mind refused to accept. Through the crack in the door, I saw something that left me paralyzed. Albert was sitting on the edge of the bed, moving his legs normally, while Nancy was sitting on his lap. They were kissing in a way that made me feel as if all the air had been sucked from my lungs. "When are we going to tell her?" asked Nancy between kisses. "Not yet," Albert replied. "I need to make sure that the money she's saving for my treatment is transferred to the account I opened. Then we'll take that money and go to Chicago. No one knows us there." "And the children?" asked Nancy. "She can keep them. I never wanted so many kids anyway," he said, with a coldness that cut me like a knife. I retreated silently, my legs trembling so much I thought I would fall right there. I picked up the sleeping Catherine, left the house without making noise, and walked to my sister Julia's house, 3 blocks away. "What happened, Teresa? You're as white as a sheet," exclaimed Julia when she saw me. I told her what I had witnessed, the words tumbling out between sobs. Julia, who was always stronger and more decisive than me, hugged me for a long time. "You're not going back to that house today. Stay here with the children. I'll pick up Diana and Jason from school and tell them you're all sleeping here because Catherine is sick, and I don't want my niece and nephews to be alone with that. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. That night, lying in the guest bed of my sister's house, with Catherine sleeping beside me, I stayed awake developing a plan. It wasn't just the betrayal that was eating me up inside. It was the lie, the manipulation, the months of sacrifice while he was having fun at my expense. And worst of all was knowing that he intended to steal the little money I had managed to save with so much sacrifice. In the days that followed, I pretended I didn't know anything. I returned home and continued caring for Albert as always, but I began to observe carefully. I noticed how he tensed when I approached without warning. How objects moved when I was out, indicating that he got up. How the medication levels decreased strangely, suggesting he was throwing them away instead of taking them. I went to the bank and transferred our savings to an account I opened in my sister's name. If he wanted to rob me, he would find only crumbs. A week after my discovery, I asked my mother to stay with the children for an afternoon. I said I needed to go to Philadelphia to get a special medicine for Albert. It was a lie, of course. I hid at the neighbor's house, waiting for Nancy to arrive for the physical therapy session. As soon as I saw Nancy enter my house, I waited 20 minutes, enough time for them to feel safe in their betrayal. And then I entered silently through the back door. This time, I wasn't content to peer through the crack. I opened the door all at once, finding exactly what I expected. Albert standing, embracing Nancy, both in a state of semi-nudity. "So the miracle happened and nobody told me," I said with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. The two froze. Albert's face went from shock to contempt in seconds. "Teresa, I can explain," stammered Nancy, trying to cover herself. "No, you can't," I replied. "Get dressed and get out of my house now." Nancy gathered her clothes and left hurriedly, without even looking at Albert. It was impressive how that young woman who seemed so dedicated and professional now fled like a thief caught in the act. When we were alone, Albert sat on the bed, no longer pretending difficulty in moving. "How long have you known?" he asked, in an almost bored tone. "Long enough to transfer our money to a place where you'll never find it," I replied. "Long enough to understand that you never really loved me." Albert laughed, a cold laugh I'll never forget. "Love? I married you because your father had the best land in town, and I needed it to expand my business. You were always so naive, Teresa, so dedicated, so dull." Each word was like a slap, but I stood firm. "And the children? You never loved your own children?" He shrugged. "They're just kids. There are plenty of them. Nancy is young. We can have others." It was at that moment that something inside me broke irreparably. All the years of submission, of accepting less than I deserved, of putting his happiness above mine, all of it crumbled like a sandcastle. In its place arose an anger I had never felt before. You're despicable, Albert. You pretended to be paralyzed for months. You let me kill myself working to take care of you. You planned to steal what little money we had and run away with that woman. And now you have the audacity to say our children don't matter? He stood up, walking toward me with muscles visibly weakened by the long period of inactivity. Even so, he was a strong man, much stronger than me. And what are you going to do about it, Teresa? Tell everyone? Who's going to believe you over me? I'm Albert Sanders. Everyone in this town respects me. You're just you. He began to climb the stairs, probably to get his belongings from upstairs. Each step was slow, evidencing that, although he could walk, his muscles were weak from disuse. I'm going to get my things and leave. Don't worry. I'll send the divorce papers soon. You can keep the kids, I don't care, but the house and the store are mine. It was then that the words came out of my mouth. Words that would change the course of our lives forever. If you want to pretend to be paralyzed so badly to cheat on me, then you won't need to pretend anymore. I can't explain what happened next. It was as if someone else was controlling my body. In an impulse that lasted less than a second, my hands pushed Albert's back when he was halfway up the stairs. Time seemed to slow down. I saw his body lose balance, his arms flailing in the air, trying to grab the railing, but his weakened muscles weren't quick enough. He fell, rolling down the wooden steps until he hit the floor of the entrance hall with a thud. The silence that followed was deafening. Albert was motionless on the floor, in a strange and unnatural position. For a terrible moment, I thought I had killed him. I ran down the stairs and knelt beside him. He was alive, breathing, but unconscious. A pool of blood was beginning to form under his head. I ran to the phone and called Dr. Andrews. Come quickly, doctor. Albert fell down the stairs. He was trying to climb up by himself. I told him he shouldn't, but he insisted. I think he's very badly hurt. The lie came out so naturally that I almost believed it myself. While waiting for the ambulance to arrive, I looked at the unconscious body of the man I once thought I loved. I felt no remorse at that moment, just an immense emptiness and the certainty that nothing would be the same again. When the ambulance arrived, my body was trembling like a leaf. I don't know if it was fear, regret, or simply the shock of seeing that man fallen at my feet. The paramedics rushed in, put a cervical collar on Albert, and immobilized him on a rigid stretcher before taking him to the hospital. I remember one of them asking me, "How did it happen, ma'am?" He thought he could climb the stairs by himself. I tried to stop him. I swear I tried. I went to get water in the kitchen for a minute, and when I came back, he was already fallen. The words came out of my mouth in a broken way. Julia arrived soon after to stay with the children, and I followed in the ambulance. During the entire journey, the paramedic tried to revive Albert, who remained unconscious. I remember looking at his face, a face I knew every line, every expression, and feeling as if I were looking at a stranger. How could I have lived so many years beside someone and not realized who he really was? At the hospital, the small waiting room soon filled up. The news of the fall of the respectable businessman Albert Sanders spread like wildfire. Jerome, his brother, arrived breathless, his face contorted with genuine concern. Albert's mother, Mrs. Florence, a 70-year-old woman, was brought in supported by her 2 daughters. Everyone looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "How could this happen, Teresa?" asked Florence, holding my hands tightly. "Wasn't he bedridden? How did he manage to climb the stairs?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the lies piling up. "He was having small improvements, Mrs. Florence. The doctor said it was normal in cases like his, moments of sensitivity in the legs, but he still wasn't strong enough to walk, much less climb stairs." The night dragged on. At 3 a.m, Dr. Andrews finally came out of the operating room. His grave face said it all before his words confirmed it. Albert suffered a serious injury to the cervical spine. "We did what we could, but I'm afraid this time the paralysis is real and permanent. We've managed to stabilize him, but we need to transfer him to Philadelphia as soon as possible. We don't have the resources here for the treatment he's going to need." A murmur of despair ran through the room. Mrs. Florence collapsed in tears in her daughter's arms. Jerome punched the wall in anger, as if he could break reality with his fists. And I was paralyzed, feeling a strange cocktail of emotions I never imagined possible. There was guilt, of course, a guilt that lodged in my chest like a cold stone. But God forgive me, there was also a shadow of dark satisfaction. You wanted to pretend you were paralyzed? Now you don't have to pretend anymore, I thought, and immediately hated myself for the thought. The next morning, Albert was transferred to a specialized hospital in Philadelphia. Jerome and the older sister Margaret accompanied the ambulance. I stayed behind. I needed to take care of the children. At least that's what I said. The truth is that I couldn't look Albert in the eyes when he woke up, not out of guilt for what I did, but for fear that he would denounce me. 3 days later, Jerome returned alone. He came directly to our house. It was still our house at that moment. His face was haggard, with deep shadows under his eyes that betrayed sleepless nights. "Albert woke up yesterday," he said, sitting heavily at the kitchen table while I served coffee. "The doctors confirmed it. He will never walk again, Teresa. The injury was too severe. It affected the spinal cord at the neck level." I lowered my eyes, pretending to absorb the news as if it were a surprise. "He asked about you," Jerome continued. "He wants you to come see him." I felt a chill. "I can't leave the children now, Jerome. Diana has had a fever since yesterday." "And he said some strange things, Teresa." Jerome interrupted me, his eyes now fixed on mine. "He said you pushed him down the stairs." The world seemed to freeze around me. The cup I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. "What? That's absurd. Why would I do such a thing? He's my husband, the father of my children." Jerome continued to observe me, his eyes searching for any sign of guilt on my face. "That's what I told him, that it was the trauma talking or maybe the pain medications. After all, you dedicated months of your life caring for him after the accident. Why would you do this now?" "Exactly," I replied, trying to control the tremor in my voice as I bent down to pick up the broken pieces of the cup. "Why would I do this?" "The other thing," said Jerome after a long silence. "Albert confessed that he was having an affair with the nurse. He said you found out, and that's why you pushed him." I stood up slowly, the broken pieces of the cup in the palm of my hand. One of them cut my finger, and a drop of blood ran down, red and accusing. "He said that?" Jerome nodded. "He also said that he was faking part of his condition, that he was already improving, but didn't tell anyone." I put the broken pieces on the table and sat down, suddenly exhausted. The lie seemed pointless at that point. It's true. He was cheating on me with Nancy. I found out last week. He could walk, Jerome. Not perfectly, but he could. It was all a charade, so he could be with her while I bent over backwards to care for him and the children. Jerome's face contorted with disgust. He had always been the more upright, more honest brother. "So it's true. The scoundrel was deceiving everyone. But Teresa, that doesn't justify—" "I didn't push him," I interrupted, the lie now coming out with more conviction. "We had an argument, yes. He tried to climb the stairs to get his things, said he was going to leave me, take our money, and run away with Nancy. I yelled at him, said horrible things, I won't deny it. But then I went to the kitchen. When I came back, he had already fallen." I don't know if Jerome believed me. Perhaps he wanted to believe, because the alternative, that I, the quiet and submissive Teresa, had deliberately hurt his brother, was too disturbing. "I'm going back to Philadelphia tomorrow," he finally said. "Albert is going to need constant care now. We thought about bringing him back here, but—" "No," I said firmly. "He can't come back to this house." Jerome seemed surprised by my resolution. "Teresa, I know what he did was terrible, but he's your husband, in sickness and in health, remember? He broke his vows long before I did, Jerome, and it wasn't just the betrayal. He was going to abandon the children. He said he never really wanted them." "What kind of man does that?" The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. "What are you going to do then?" he finally asked. It was a question for which I still had no answer. What does a 27-year-old woman do with 3 small children, without a profession, in a time when divorce was practically unthinkable? How would I survive the scandal, the looks, the whispers? "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I know I can't stay married to him." In the following week, the news spread through the town like a virus. First, that Albert was really paralyzed, this time with no chance of recovery. Then, that he had confessed to the affair with Nancy, who had now disappeared from town without a trace. Finally, that I refused to visit him in the hospital or to take him back into our home. The looks in the street were judgmental. In church, on Sunday, I felt like a leper. No one sat on the same bench as me and the children. Father Wilson gave a sermon about the wife's duty to remain by her husband's side, in sickness and in health, looking directly at me. Even Mrs. Ethel, who had been so friendly before, now crossed the street to avoid having to greet me. The children suffered too. Diana came home from school crying because a friend said her mother had forbidden her from playing with the daughter of the woman who abandoned her sick husband. Jason got into fights, defending my name. Only little Catherine, still oblivious to everything because of her tender age, continued to smile and play as before. 1 month after the accident, I received a letter from a lawyer in Philadelphia. Albert was filing for divorce, accusing me of abandonment and, ironically, attempted murder. The letter said he wouldn't take the case to the police if I agreed to give up the house, the store, and any child support. I cried all night after reading that letter. Not for the end of the marriage. That had ended the moment I saw Albert in Nancy's arms, but for the injustice of it all. He was cheating on me, planning to abandon me, and now I would lose everything. The next day, I sought out the only lawyer in town, Mr. Ferguson, an elderly gentleman who had been a friend of my father's. I showed him the letter and explained the whole situation, omitting, of course, the fatal push. "This is pure blackmail," he said, adjusting his thick glasses. "He knows he can't prove the accusation of attempted murder, so he's using this to force you to give up what is rightfully yours." "What can I do, sir? I don't have money to fight him in court." Mr. Ferguson took off his glasses and cleaned them meticulously with a handkerchief. A habit that I would soon learn was his way of buying time to think. "There's an option that might be the best for everyone, Teresa. Accept the divorce, but don't give up the house. The store was his before the marriage, so we can't claim it. But the house was purchased during the marriage. It's your right to keep it, to raise the children. As for the accusation, let him try to prove it. It will be his word against yours." And after what he confessed about the affair, I doubt any judge would give him credit. Following Mr. Ferguson's advice, I responded to Albert's lawyer's letter. The negotiation dragged on for weeks with veiled threats from both sides. Finally, we reached an agreement. I would keep the house and custody of the children. Albert would keep the store, which would now be managed by Jerome, and wouldn't have to pay child support. In exchange, the accusations would be withdrawn, and the divorce would proceed due to incompatibility of temperaments, the most socially acceptable term at that time. In September 1965, I officially became a divorced woman, a rarity and a stigma in those times. The house, which had once seemed a symbol of prosperity, was now a constant reminder of failure. Every corner held memories I wanted to forget. The staircase, especially, was like a silent accusation every time I passed by it. I started taking in laundry and ironing to support the children. Jerome, as upright as he was, couldn't help me much. The store was in debt, and the costs of Albert's treatment consumed any profit. My hands, once soft and well-kept, soon became rough and marked by heavy work. My days began at 5 in the morning and ended after 10 at night. The people in town slowly divided into 2 groups: those who condemned me for abandoning an invalid husband and those who admired me for moving forward despite everything. The women, especially the older ones, were the harshest with me. The men, curiously, seemed more understanding, perhaps because they secretly feared the same fate as Albert if they betrayed their wives. A few months after the divorce, I received a visit from Father Wilson. It was a hot summer afternoon, and I was in the backyard hanging freshly washed white sheets when he appeared at the gate. "Mrs. Sanders, may we talk?" I invited him in, anxious and a little fearful. The priest never came to houses unless it was to give last rites to someone on their deathbed. We sat at the kitchen table, and I offered him coffee, which he accepted politely. After a few minutes of trivial conversation about the weather and the children's health, he finally got to the point. "I was visiting Albert in Philadelphia last week. He's adapting to his new condition. It's a terrible ordeal, no doubt, but he mentioned something that deeply disturbed me." I felt my stomach sink. "What did he say, Father?" "He said he fears for your soul, Teresa, that you carry a grave sin, and that he prays for your forgiveness." The words were soft, but the priest's gaze was inquisitorial. For a moment, I thought he knew everything and was there to extract a confession. "Father, my ex-husband is not in a position to judge anyone's sins. He betrayed our marriage vows, planned to abandon me and the children, and now wants to pose as a victim. If there's someone who needs prayers for divine forgiveness, it's not me." The priest seemed surprised by my firmness. Perhaps he expected to find a woman broken by remorse, not this new Teresa that I myself barely recognized. "Wrath is a dangerous sin, my daughter. It leads to actions we later bitterly regret. I'm not wrathful, Father. I'm disappointed, hurt, and above all, determined to move forward. I have 3 children to raise, and no one is going to do it for me." He drank his coffee in silence, watching me over the cup. Finally, he placed it on the saucer with a sigh. "I also came here to tell you that there are people in the community willing to help you, Teresa. It's not easy for a woman alone to raise 3 children." It was the first genuine offer of help I had received in months, and I was moved, despite all my effort to appear strong. "Thank you, Father. It really hasn't been easy." When he was gone, I sat there for a long time, my hands still trembling. Albert continued to haunt me even from afar. His ghost hovered over my life, like a shadow, constantly reminding me of what I had done. That night, I made a decision that would change our lives forever. The house where we lived, although mine by right, was filled with bad memories. Moreover, the people of the town would never let me forget the past as long as I lived there. We needed a new beginning somewhere else. The next morning, I sought out Mr. Ferguson again and put the house up for sale. He warned me that I would probably receive less than half of the real value, given the rush and the circumstances. I didn't care. Any money would be enough to start over elsewhere, away from accusing looks and malicious whispers. 2 weeks later, the house was sold to a coffee merchant who was moving to town. With the money in my pocket and 3 suitcases containing everything we owned, I took my children and boarded the train to Morristown, a larger city about 100 miles away, where no one knew us and where our past wouldn't follow us like a curse. Morristown received me as only big cities can, with indifference. No one turned their face when I passed. No one whispered behind fans or half-open doors. To everyone, I was just another widow with children. That's how I introduced myself, trying to rebuild our life. That anonymity was my first relief in months. We rented a room at the back of Mrs. Abigail's house, a 65-year-old widow who supplemented her pension by renting rooms. The space was tiny for the 4 of us. Just 1 bedroom with an improvised kitchen and a bathroom we shared with other tenants. But it had a small veranda where the children could play. And, more importantly, there were no stairs. Stairs had become a trigger for recurring nightmares. "Do you sew well?" asked Mrs. Abigail on the first day while helping me organize our few things. I showed her some clothes I had made for the children. She examined the seams with critical eyes and then smiled. "My daughter works at a garment factory nearby. I'll talk to her. Maybe she can get something for you." A week later, I started working at Spring Garments, a noisy warehouse where 20 women operated industrial sewing machines from dawn to dusk. The heat was suffocating, the noise deafening, and the salary a pittance, but it was a job, and I was grateful for it. Mrs. Abigail, good heart that she had, stayed with Catherine during the day. Diana and Jason were enrolled in the local public school. The first months were of a hardship that I can barely describe today. I woke up at 5 in the morning, prepared a quick breakfast and the lunch that the children would take, got everyone ready, and ran out not to be late for work. I returned at 7 in the evening, exhausted, fingers pricked by needles, back aching, still having to make dinner, help with homework, and put everyone to bed. On Sundays, the only day off, I washed clothes and made small repairs to our accommodation to reduce the rent. But there was a freedom in that simple life that I had never known before. For the first time, I made my own decisions, managed our small budget, and saw the fruit of my work. There was no husband to please, to fear, or to judge me. The children also flourished in that new environment. Diana, always so quiet and anxious in our old house, became more confident and communicative. Jason made friends quickly and stopped getting into fights. Even Catherine, who used to cry at night calling for her father, now slept peacefully. The money from the sale of the house, which I kept sewn into the lining of a pillow, was our emergency fund. I had promised myself not to touch it unless absolutely necessary. It was our only security in a world where single women were seen as easy prey. After 6 months at the factory, I was promoted to finishing supervisor. The salary improved a bit and the work was less physically exhausting, though the responsibility was greater. We were then able to rent a small house, 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and a small yard where I planted herbs and some flowers. The children finally had space to play and study. It was during this time that I met Mrs. Janet, a woman of almost 70 who sold custom-made clothes to the more affluent families in the city. She appeared at the factory looking for someone who knew how to do a specific type of finishing on party dresses. "Who did this stitch?" she asked, examining a piece I had just finished. "I did, ma'am," I replied, fearful of having made some mistake. She adjusted her glasses and examined the stitch more closely. "It's been a long time since I've seen such delicate work. Who did you learn from?" "From my mother, and then I perfected it on my own." "Mrs. Janet took a card from her purse and handed it to me. "Come see me on Sunday if you can. I have a proposal for you." That Sunday, after church, I took the children to meet Mrs. Janet's atelier, an old and elegant house in the center of the city. While Diana, Jason, and Catherine were distracted with the colorful scraps she had wisely separated for them, we talked about the possibility of me working for her in my spare time, doing special finishes that her arthritic hands could no longer execute perfectly. "I pay per piece and much better than that factory," she said bluntly. "If your work continues with this quality, you'll soon have more orders than you can handle." That's how I began my double journey. During the day at the factory and at night, after the children were asleep, sewing for Mrs. Janet by the light of a lamp. It was exhausting, but each finished dress meant extra money that went straight to the savings I dreamed of making for my children's education. A year passed at this pace. My name began to circulate among Mrs. Janet's clients. "Who did this perfect finishing?" they would ask. Soon, some began to specifically request my work. When the mayor's daughter got married, wearing a dress with embroidery done by me, doors really opened. In 1967, 2 years after our arrival in Morristown, Mrs. Janet called me for a serious conversation. "I'm getting old, Teresa. My hands no longer obey as before, and my eyes tire quickly. I'm thinking of retiring, but I don't want to leave my clients helpless." My heart raced, anticipating what would come next. "You have talent, girl. More than that, you have determination. I see how you sacrifice your nights for your children's future. I'd like to propose a partnership. You take over production. I'll handle sales and administration. At least until you learn everything. Then, who knows, you might buy my part." That night, I couldn't sleep. The proposal was tempting, but frightening. It would mean leaving my job at the factory, a guaranteed salary, however small, to venture into the uncertain world of business. What if I failed? What if clients didn't accept a divorced woman as their seamstress? What if the money wasn't enough to support the children? I spent the entire night doing calculations, weighing pros and cons. The next morning, I sat the children at the table, served breakfast, and announced, "We need to make an important decision as a family." I explained in the simplest way possible Mrs. Janet's proposal. Diana, at 8 years old, immediately understood the implications. "Does it mean you'll work less, Mom? Will you be able to pick me up from school some days?" "No, my love. In the beginning, I'll probably work even more, but in the future, if everything goes well, yes, I'll have more time for you." Jason, practical as always, asked, "Will we earn more money? Can we buy a bicycle?" I smiled at his simplicity. If we work hard and save, maybe one day. Catherine, at 4 years old, didn't quite understand what was at stake, but she sensed the tension in the air. "Is Mommy sad?" she asked, her little eyes concerned. "No, dear. Mommy is thinking. Sometimes adults make frowny faces when they're thinking hard." At the end of that week, I gave my answer to Mrs. Janet. I became a partner at Janet's atelier, which soon became known as Janet and Teresa's atelier. The first months were even more difficult than the previous ones. I worked from sunup to sundown, learning not only the creative part, but also how to deal with suppliers, negotiate prices, manage production time. Mrs. Janet was a demanding but patient teacher. "You're not just sewing dresses, you're building relationships," she would say. "Each client who leaves here satisfied brings 3 more." Diana, now a young lady of 9, took on responsibilities beyond her age, caring for her younger siblings while I worked. Jason helped as he could, making small deliveries to nearby clients. Even Catherine participated, separating buttons by colors and sizes. We were a team, each doing their part for the success of our small family business. In 1968, an unexpected episode changed the course of our story again. One afternoon, while attending to a client, the bell of the atelier rang. Mrs. Janet went to answer and returned with a strange expression. "Teresa, there's a young woman asking for you. She says she comes from Riverdale." My blood froze. I excused myself to the client and went to the reception. There was Margaret, Albert's sister, looking out of place and nervous. "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" I asked bluntly. "It wasn't easy," she replied. "I followed clues, asked around until someone mentioned a talented seamstress named Teresa in Morristown. I needed to find you." I asked her to accompany me to the back of the atelier, where we could talk without interruptions. My heart was racing. Had Albert gotten worse? Had he revealed to someone what really happened on those stairs? Was the police on the way? "Albert died last week," said Margaret without preamble as soon as we sat down. "A respiratory problem that got complicated. It was quick, at least." I felt a strange weight in my chest. It wasn't exactly sadness, but it wasn't relief either. It was a feeling of closure, as if a difficult book had finally reached its last page. "I'm sorry," I murmured, more out of habit than real feeling. "Before he died, he left something for you," continued Margaret, opening her purse and taking out an envelope. "It's a letter. He asked me to deliver it personally." I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written on the front, in Albert's irregular handwriting, probably affected by his condition. "I won't stay to watch you read it," said Margaret, rising. "I fulfilled my promise. Just one more thing. He confessed everything before he died. About Nancy, about pretending to be worse than he really was, about planning to abandon you and the children. I don't know if that means anything to you now, but I thought you should know." After she left, I sat there for a long time, looking at that envelope as if it contained a venomous snake. Part of me wanted to tear it up without reading it, to bury the past once and for all. Another part needed to know what Albert had to say after all these years. Finally, with fingers still hesitant, I opened the envelope. The letter was short, just half a page written in a trembling hand. "Teresa, when you read this, I will have already departed from this world. I don't seek your forgiveness, as I know I don't deserve it. What I did to you and our children was unforgivable. Life gave me the punishment I deserved. In these years of immobility, I had too much time to think about all my failures. I heard that you rebuilt your life, that you have your own business now. It doesn't surprise me. You were always stronger than I ever acknowledged. I just wanted you to know. That night on the stairs, I was already falling before your hands touched me. My weak muscles couldn't support me. You weren't the cause, you just accelerated the inevitable. I told Jerome this on my deathbed. Live in peace, Albert. The tears that ran down my face caught me by surprise. I wasn't crying for Albert, but for that young Teresa of 27 years old, who had carried such a heavy burden for so long. The guilt that I had kept hidden in the depths of my soul suddenly seemed lighter, as if someone had opened a window in a dark, stuffy room. That letter, those few lines scribbled by a man on the verge of death, didn't erase the years of suffering, the sleepless nights, the superhuman effort to rebuild my life and raise my children. But they offered something I didn't know I still needed: closure. That night I gathered the children and told them about their father's death. Diana, now 10 years old, listened in silence, her face a mask of contradictory emotions. Jason, at 8, asked practical questions. Are we going to the funeral? Did he leave anything for us? Catherine, at just 6 years old and with almost no memory of her father, seemed more curious than sad. We won't go to the funeral, I replied calmly. He's already been buried. As for leaving something for you, yes. He left an important lesson that we should always be honest with those we love. That night marked a new chapter in our story. The ghost of Albert, who had haunted me for years in nightmares and moments of doubt, finally seemed to have found his rest. And I, for the first time since that fateful night on the stairs, felt that I could also move forward, truly free. The next day, with renewed determination, I proposed to Mrs. Janet that we expand the business. I want to start a line of ready-made dresses, not just custom-made ones, something elegant but accessible for working women like me. Mrs. Janet looked at me over her glasses, a smile slowly forming on her wrinkled face. I've been waiting for you to have that idea for months. I even have a name for this line. Rebirth. What do you think? Perfect, I replied, feeling an emotion growing in my chest. Absolutely perfect. The Rebirth line changed everything for us. We started modestly, with just 5 basic models in different sizes. Unlike custom-made clothes, which took weeks to be ready, our ready-made dresses offered something that working women of that era rarely had: convenience without sacrificing elegance. I hired 2 seamstresses to help with production: Mary, a widowed lady with skilled hands, and Connie, a young single mother who, like me years before, desperately needed an opportunity. I taught them everything I had learned and treated them, as I was never treated at the factory, with respect and dignity. They're not just employees, they're partners, I explained to Mrs. Janet when she questioned my decision to pay above-market salaries. If we prosper, they prosper with us. The end of the 1960s brought changes not only to the atelier, but to the entire country. Cities were growing rapidly, more women were entering the workforce, and fashion was transforming. Tight and formal dresses were giving way to more comfortable and practical pieces. We adapted our production quickly, always attentive to new trends. In 1970, when the Rebirth line completed 2 years, we already had a small factory with 15 employees, all women, many heads of household like me. Our reputation grew not only for the quality of the clothes, but also for the work environment we created. A place where mothers could bring their children in emergencies, where there was flexibility for medical appointments and school meetings. Mrs. Janet, although still a partner, was increasingly removed from the day-to-day business. Her almost 75 years called for rest, and she fully trusted my ability to manage everything. You've surpassed the teacher, Teresa, she said one afternoon, watching me negotiate with a fabric supplier. When I met you, I saw a broken woman struggling to survive. Today, I see a businesswoman whom other women admire and follow. Her words moved me deeply. Indeed, I had come a long way since those dark days in Riverdale. The insecure young woman, who depended on her husband for everything, was now a respected businesswoman in Morristown. My children were also flourishing. Diana, at 12, already showed talent for drawing and created sketches of dresses that we often incorporated into our collections. Jason, at 10, was excellent with numbers and helped me calculate costs and prices, a surprising skill for someone so young. Catherine, at 8, charmed clients with her vivacious personality and her sincere comments about how the clothes looked on them. Our house had also changed. We left renting behind and bought a comfortable residence in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it had spacious rooms for each child, a flower garden, and, most importantly, a sewing room just for me, where I could create and experiment with new ideas. In 1971, I received an invitation I never imagined possible. The Morristown Chamber of Commerce invited me to give a talk on female entrepreneurship. Me, Teresa, who had barely finished elementary school, speaking to business people and merchants about business. "I don't know if I have the courage," I confessed to Mrs. Janet when I showed her the invitation. "Courage?" she laughed. "The woman who faced everything you faced is afraid to speak to a few people in suits? Nonsense. You have a powerful story, Teresa. Use it to inspire other women." I accepted the invitation. I prepared for weeks, rehearsing in front of the mirror, rewriting my speech countless times. I bought a new outfit, a navy blue suit that I designed especially for the occasion. I wanted to look professional, confident, a real businesswoman. On the night of the talk, the Chamber's auditorium was full, mostly men, but with a surprising number of women too. My hands were sweating when I took the stage, but as soon as I began to speak, the insecurity disappeared. I talked about starting from scratch, about balancing motherhood and work, about finding opportunities where others saw only obstacles. "No one chooses the cards they receive in life," I said, concluding my speech. "What matters is how we play with them." Each challenge I faced taught me something valuable that I apply today in business. Resilience, creativity, empathy. I don't have a college degree, but I have a doctorate from the School of Life. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Several women came to speak with me afterward, many with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving voice to their own struggles. It was one of the most rewarding nights of my life. The repercussion of that talk was surprising. A local newspaper published an article about the seamstress who became a businesswoman, with my photo and excerpts from my speech. New clients appeared at the atelier, curious to meet the woman behind the story. And more importantly, young women began to seek me out, asking for advice on how to start their own businesses. I realized I had found another vocation besides sewing, mentoring women who, like me, needed a chance and guidance. I began to offer small workshops at the atelier on Saturdays, teaching not only sewing techniques, but also basic notions of administration, pricing, and customer service. In 1972, Mrs. Janet passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 77 years old and left a legacy not only of elegance and good taste, but of generosity and vision. In her will, she left her part of the atelier to me with a single condition: that I keep her name in the brand. Janet and Teresa's atelier then officially became mine, although I never considered removing her from the name. She was much more than a partner. She was the first person to truly believe in me after I left Riverdale. With the business growing, I decided it was time to invest in the formal education of my children, beyond what public school offered. I enrolled Diana, now 14, in a design course. Jason, at 12, began accounting classes. Even Catherine, with her 10 years, had piano lessons, not because it had any relation to the business, but because she showed a natural talent for music. "You will have all the opportunities I didn't have," I promised them one dinner night. "Study, learn, grow. Knowledge is the only thing that no one can take away from you." It was during this period of prosperity and stability that the past came knocking at my door again, this time in the form of a figure I never expected to see again. It was an October afternoon in 1972. The atelier was busy with preparations for the end-of-year collection when Mary came to me, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sanders, there's a man asking for you. Says he came from Riverdale." I felt a familiar chill. Who could it be? Albert was dead. Jerome had never shown interest in finding me. Was it some collector of old debts? Or worse, some investigator still interested in the circumstances of Albert's fall? "What does he look like?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A gentleman in his 40s, well-dressed, uses a cane. His name is Joseph Mendez. Says he was your children's teacher." Joseph. The name awakened a distant memory. He had been Diana's teacher in the first year in Riverdale. A kind and patient man who helped my daughter when others avoided her for being the daughter of the divorced woman. I instinctively fixed my hair and went to the reception. There he was, older than in my memories, with some gray strands at the temples, but with the same calm smile and intelligent eyes. Professor Joseph, what a surprise! He stood up with some difficulty, leaning on his cane. "Mrs. Sanders, I finally found you." I invited him to my office, where we could talk with privacy. I offered coffee, which he accepted with a smile. "What brings you to Morristown after so many years?" I asked, curious and slightly apprehensive. "I recently retired," he explained. "After 30 years teaching children in Riverdale, I decided it was time to see the world beyond that small town. Morristown is my first stop." There was something in his look that told me that wasn't the whole truth, but I didn't insist. Instead, I asked about the news from town, about old acquaintances, about how Riverdale had changed in recent years. We talked for almost an hour, remembering stories, laughing at coincidences. Joseph was pleasant company, articulate, good-humored, with that unique ability of good teachers to make any subject seem fascinating. When he finally stood up to leave, he made an unexpected invitation. "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight, Mrs. Sanders? There's something important I need to tell you, and I prefer to do it outside the work environment." I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't gone out with a man since Albert. My life had been entirely dedicated to the children and work, but there was something in the respectful way Joseph treated me that inspired confidence. "Yes, I accept, but I need to be home before 10. I have 3 children waiting for me." "Naturally," he smiled. "I'll pick you up at 7. That night, I got ready with a care that for years I hadn't dedicated to my appearance. I chose a simple but elegant dress from our latest collection. Catherine, now a preteen observer, immediately noticed. "Mom looks pretty. Are you going somewhere special?" I explained to the children that I would be having dinner with an old acquaintance from Riverdale. Diana, now a teenager, and romanticizing everything, immediately asked if it was a date. "Of course not," I replied, feeling my cheeks flush. "It's just dinner with an old friend who's passing through town." Joseph arrived punctually at 7, briefly met my children, charmed them with some stories from Riverdale, and then we left for the restaurant, a simple but respectable place specializing in home cooking. It was only after dessert, when we were having coffee, that he finally revealed the true reason for his visit. "Teresa, I didn't come to Morristown by chance. I came specifically to find you." I put my coffee cup on the saucer, suddenly alert. "And why would you do that?" He took a deep breath, like someone gathering courage for a difficult jump. "Because I couldn't forget the brave woman who left everything behind to protect her children. Because I deeply regret not having done more to help you when everyone in town turned their backs. And because I've thought about you for years, wondering if you found the happiness you deserve." His words caught me completely off guard. Joseph, the respected teacher, single by choice according to rumors, had thought about me all these years. "I don't know what to say," I confessed, genuinely dazed. "You don't need to say anything now," he replied gently. "I'll be in town for 2 weeks. I would just like to get to know you better, Teresa. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 adults rediscovering each other after so many years." I accepted his invitation for a second date, and then a third. I discovered in Joseph a fascinating mind, a man who loved literature, music, history. In our conversations, we talked about everything: the books we had read, the changes in the country, the dreams we still had. He told me about his own story. Son of farmers, studied on scholarship, became a teacher by vocation. He never married because he took care of his sick mother until her death, a few years before. He was a man of solid values, compassionate, patient, and most importantly, he respected my independence, admired my strength, didn't want to save or protect me, wanted to walk beside me as an equal. When his 2 weeks in Morristown came to an end, I realized I wasn't ready to say goodbye. An unexpected connection had formed between us, something I never experienced in my marriage with Albert. "I need to go back to Riverdale to resolve some matters," he said on our last night together. "But if you'll allow, I'd like to return, perhaps to stay." That night, lying in my bed, I reflected on how life could be surprising. The fate that had taken so much from me now seemed to be offering a new chance at happiness. I, who had sworn never to trust a man again, found myself contemplating the possibility of opening my heart once more. The following months were of frequent correspondence between Morristown and Riverdale. Long, sincere letters, where we continued to build our connection at a distance. My children noticed the change in me. I smiled more, hummed while sewing, seemed lighter. In the spring of 1973, Joseph returned, this time not as a visitor, but as someone seeking a new beginning. He rented a small apartment near our house and began giving private lessons to supplement his retirement. Our relationship grew naturally, without rush. I formally introduced him to my children as someone special in my life. Diana, always romantic, was delighted. Jason, more cautious, observed Joseph with critical eyes, testing him with difficult questions about his intentions. Catherine simply asked if he knew how to play checkers, her favorite game. Over time, Joseph won not only my heart, but also the respect and affection of my children. He never tried to replace the father figure, but offered something that Albert had never given: genuine support, gentle guidance, consistent presence. In December of that year, under the lights of the Christmas tree that we decorated together, Joseph surprised me with a small velvet box. "It's not an engagement ring," he explained, seeing my alarmed expression. "I know you value your independence, and I deeply respect that. That's why it's just a symbol of my commitment to you, Teresa. A commitment of respect, companionship, and love. If one day you want more, I'll be here. If not, this commitment still remains." Inside the box was a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a bird with open wings, a symbol of freedom and flight. That night, as I watched my children sleep and thought about the path we had traveled together, I felt a peace I never imagined possible after everything we had lived through. The pain, the betrayal, even that terrible moment on the stairs. All of this was part of my story, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now were the choices I made afterward, the courage to start over, the determination to build something from nothing, the ability to open my heart again, and, perhaps, the possibility of a new chapter alongside someone who saw me exactly as I was, not as a victim to be saved, but as a strong woman who had transformed her pain into purpose. The 1970s followed its course, and with it, our life gained a sweetness that once seemed impossible. Joseph integrated perfectly into our family, bringing a balanced and gentle male presence that my children, especially Jason, so much needed. We never formalized our union on paper. The memories of the previous marriage still weighed on me, but in all the ways that mattered, we were a complete family. The atelier prospered beyond my most optimistic expectations. In 1975, our small factory already employed 30 women, and our rebirth line was sold in stores in 5 cities in the region. We also expanded to children's clothes, a line I named Little Dreams, inspired by the drawings that Catherine made. Diana, at 17, officially became our main designer. Her talent for fashion was undeniable. She had an eye for colors and shapes that surpassed mine. After completing the technical design course, I insisted she continue her studies. "You're going to college, my daughter," I declared one January night, handing her an envelope with the registration for the fashion design entrance exam in the capital. "I won't accept any discussion. The atelier will be here when you graduate." Her eyes filled with tears. "But Mom, how will I pay? And who will help with the collections?" "Money is not a problem," I replied proudly. "I've been saving for this since you were 7 years old. As for the collections, I can hire another designer temporarily. Your education comes first." Joseph, who overheard our conversation, smiled approvingly. As an educator, he always valued formal study more than anything. "Your mother is absolutely right, Diana. Knowledge opens doors we don't even imagine exist." Jason, now 15, already showed the business acumen he had revealed since childhood. He reorganized our entire inventory and accounting system, implementing methods he learned in the courses he attended. "We're wasting money with this supplier," he would say, showing me detailed spreadsheets he had created. "If we switch to this other one, we'll save 15% a year." Catherine, my youngest at 13, was the artist of the family. The piano she began studying as a hobby transformed into a true passion. Her teacher insisted she had enough talent to become a concert pianist. "She has what we call perfect pitch, Mrs. Sanders," he explained. "It's a rare gift." My heart filled with pride seeing my children flourishing, each in their own way. What a difference from the life they would have had if we had remained in Riverdale under Albert's shadow. Sometimes, on the rare occasions when I allowed myself to revisit the past, I thought about the strange paradox. That terrible moment on the stairs, which for years had haunted me as my worst mistake, ended up being the catalyst for our liberation. In September 1975, an unexpected event came to shake our stability, achieved with so much effort. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The atelier was working at full steam with preparations for the summer collection when Mary came to my office looking disturbed. "Mrs. Sanders, there's a young woman who wants to speak with you. She says it's urgent." "A new client?" I asked, without raising my eyes from the fabrics I was examining. "No, ma'am. She says her name is Nancy Cardoso." The fabric slipped from my hands. Nancy. That name I hadn't heard in 10 years, which belonged to a chapter of my life I considered permanently closed. The nurse, who had disappeared after Albert's fall, was there in my atelier. "Send her in," I finally said, after a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. The woman who crossed the door of my office hardly resembled the seductive young woman I had seen in my husband's arms so many years ago. Nancy, now in her 30s, looked much older. Her face was marked by premature wrinkles. Her once brilliant hair was lifeless, and there was a shadow in her eyes that spoke of difficulties and regrets. "Thank you for receiving me," she said, her voice trembling. "I wasn't sure if you would accept." "Why are you here?" I asked directly, without offering her a seat. She took a deep breath, like someone gathering courage. "I'm sick, Teresa. The doctors say I have a few months. Before I go, I need to clear my conscience." Something in the way she spoke, the raw frankness, the vulnerability, made my initial hostility diminish a little. I indicated the chair in front of me. "Sit down." For almost an hour, Nancy unraveled the story of the last 10 years of her life. After fleeing Riverdale with part of the savings that Albert had hidden, she established herself in a distant city using a false name. For a few years, she lived reasonably well until the money ran out. Without references, without legitimate documents, she ended up in increasingly degrading jobs. "I thought what we did, Albert and I, was a great love story that justified everything," she said with a bitter laugh. "What a fool I was. He manipulated me as much as he tried to manipulate you." When she learned of Albert's fall and his true paralysis, she was afraid of being accused of complicity if she returned. Years later, when she finally gathered the courage to seek him out at the hospital, she discovered that he had died months before. "Why are you telling me all this now?" I asked, still suspicious of her intentions. "Because I need you to know that I deeply regret not only the suffering I caused you and the children, but my own cowardice." I should have faced the consequences of my actions, not run away. Her eyes, now teary, met mine. And also because I have a son of Albert's. The revelation fell like a bomb. A son, a half-brother to my children, growing up somewhere without us knowing of his existence. "He's 9 years old," continued Nancy. "His name is Daniel. He's a good boy, intelligent like his father, but kind in a way Albert never was. I'm here because I need to ensure he'll be okay when I'm gone. I have no family, no one to take care of him." I immediately understood what she was asking. She wanted me, the woman whose lover had betrayed, the woman whose life she had helped destroy, to take responsibility for her son. The audacity was almost incomprehensible. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked, buying time to process it all. "It wasn't difficult. Your atelier is known in the region. Besides, Margaret, Albert's sister, helped me. She knows about Daniel. She always sent some money when she could." I remained silent for a long time, observing that broken woman in front of me. There was so much at stake: my carefully rebuilt family, the peace we had finally found, the balance I had fought so hard to establish, and now this ghost from the past, bringing with it a piece of Albert I never imagined having to face. "Where is the boy now?" I finally asked. "With a neighbor. We're staying at a boarding house nearby." "Bring him here tomorrow," I suddenly decided. "I want to meet him before making any decision." When Nancy left, I closed the office door and cried as I hadn't cried in years. Tears of anger for the past that refused to stay in the past, of confusion about what to do, of fear for my children's reaction, and surprisingly, tears of compassion for that innocent boy who didn't ask to be born in such complicated circumstances. That night, after the children went to bed, I told everything to Joseph. He listened in silence, his face reflecting concern, but not judgment. "What do you think I should do?" I asked, exhausted. "What does your heart say?" he replied, holding my hands in his. My heart is confused. Part of me wants to send Nancy away, to say that we've suffered enough because of her and Albert. Another part thinks about that boy who is not to blame for anything. Joseph nodded understandingly. "And if it were one of ours, Diana, Jason, or Catherine, needing help, wouldn't we want someone to welcome them?" His words touched something deep within me. The boy Daniel was half-brother to my children. They shared the same blood, the same heritage. Could I turn my back on him, knowing he would soon be an orphan? The next morning, Nancy appeared with Daniel. My heart jumped when I saw him. The resemblance to Albert was undeniable. The same dark, penetrating eyes, the same determined chin. But there was a sweetness in his face, a gentleness in the way he held his mother's hand, that was entirely his own. "Daniel, this is Mrs. Sanders," Nancy introduced. A family friend." The boy extended his hand politely. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." We talked for almost 2 hours. Daniel was articulate for his age, spoke passionately about books and sciences. When I asked about school, his eyes lit up. "I'm top of the class in math," he said with contained pride. While he leafed through a book I offered, I called Nancy to a corner. "Does he know about the situation? About you being sick?" "Yes," I explained as best I could. "About Albert?" "He knows his father died when he was little. I never told the details, just that he was a businessman." "And about me? About my children?" "No." She shook her head. "I thought it should be your decision, if and when to tell." After the visit, I spent days in agony, weighing all the possibilities. I spoke with a lawyer about the legal implications of assuming custody of Daniel. I consulted a psychologist about the best way to introduce this change to my children. And, most importantly, I spoke at length with Joseph, whose wisdom and balance had become my safe harbor. Finally, I gathered courage to talk with my children. It was a Sunday, and we were all at home. I asked them to gather in the living room after lunch. "I have something very important to tell you," I began, my voice firmer than I felt inside. something about the past that will affect our future. I told them everything about Nancy's reappearance, about Daniel, about her terminal illness. I saw the shock in Diana's eyes, the confusion on Catherine's face, the growing anger in Jason's expression. "You can't be seriously considering this," he exploded when I finished. "After everything that woman did, after how they destroyed our family." "Jason," I intervened, keeping calm. "The boy is not to blame. He's your half-brother, blood of your blood." "He's nothing to me," shouted Jason, standing up, "and I don't want him in our house." Diana, always the most sensitive, was crying silently. "What is he like?" she asked in a low voice. "Intelligent, polite, likes books. He seems lonely." Catherine, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "I always wanted a younger brother." Jason gave her a betrayed look and left, slamming the door. Joseph, who had witnessed everything in respectful silence, stood up to follow him. "I'll talk to him. Give him time." In the following weeks, Nancy's condition deteriorated rapidly. The cancer, already in an advanced stage, spread to her lungs. She was admitted to the municipal hospital, and Daniel began to spend more and more time with us. Gradually, a connection began to form. Catherine immediately adopted him as the little brother she always wanted. Diana, after the initial resistance, found in him an attentive listener for her stories and drawings. Only Jason kept his distance, observing the intruder with poorly disguised distrust. Joseph, as always, was the bridge that helped unite everyone. Discovering Daniel's interest in sciences, he began to do small experiments with him and Jason. Slowly, through shared curiosity, the two boys began to lower their guards. In October 1975, Nancy passed away. Daniel, now officially under my guardianship, moved permanently to our house. The adaptation wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, tears, slammed doors, but there were also moments of surprising connection, of unexpected laughter, of small daily victories. One night, about 3 months after Daniel's move, I found Jason sitting alone on the veranda, looking at the stars. I sat beside him in silence, respecting his space. "He's not like his father," Jason said finally, his voice low. "I thought he would be, but he's not." "No, he's not," I agreed gently. "Each person is unique, Jason. We aren't defined only by our blood." He showed me a math problem today. I couldn't solve it, but he taught me how to do it. There was a note of reluctant admiration in his voice. "He admires you a lot, you know? He always asks what you would think about things." Jason nodded slowly. I think it's okay for him to stay, Mom." That simple moment on the veranda marked a turning point in our family dynamics. It doesn't mean everything became perfect overnight. There were still adjustments, still difficult days, but we began to function truly as an extended family, with all the complexities and joys that brought. In 1976, I made another important decision. I finally accepted Joseph's request to formalize our union. After almost 4 years together, he had proven to be not only a loving companion for me, but an exemplary father figure for my children. All of them, including Daniel. Our ceremony was simple, just family and close friends in our house's garden. Diana designed my dress, elegant but without excesses, in a soft shade of blue. Catherine played piano during the ceremony. Jason was Joseph's best man. And Daniel, to everyone's surprise, asked to read a poem he had written especially for the occasion. "Family isn't just blood," he read with his clear boy's voice. "Family is who chooses to stay when they could leave, is who opens their arms when they could close their heart." At that moment, looking at those 4 children, my 3, and the one that fate had placed in our path, and at the gentle man who had chosen to share his life with ours, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost unbalanced me. Life had given me so many turns, so many falls, some literal and twists. The path from that terrible night on the stairs in Riverdale to this flowering garden in Morristown was long and winding. There were moments when I thought I couldn't go on. that the weight of guilt and fear would be too great to carry. But I went on, one step at a time. I built a business, raised my children, found love again, and perhaps most surprising of all, found space in my heart to forgive. Not just Albert and Nancy, but mainly myself. That impulse of anger on the stairs, that moment that for so long defined me as my worst mistake, ended up being the turning point for a life that would never have been possible otherwise. Not that it justifies it. I still carry the weight of that action. But I learned that we are more than our worst moments, that redemption is possible when we choose the path of love and courage. Today, at 78 years old, I look back and see that young Teresa of 27 years, desperate and furious, pushing her cheating husband down the stairs. I wish I could hug her and tell her that, despite everything, things will work out in the end, that she will find strength she didn't know she possessed, that she will build a life full of meaning and love, that her children will grow strong and fulfilled. I can't change the past, but I can share my story in the hope that it will inspire other women to find their own strength, their own path to reconstruction, even when everything seems lost. Because if there's something I've learned in these 78 years of life, it's that there's always a dawn after the darkest night. Always. And you, my dears, who have listened to me this far, I hope you take with you not just the story of a terrible mistake, but mainly the message that our mistakes don't need to define us forever. It's what we do after them, how we choose to get up and move forward, that truly reveals who we are. If you like this life story, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to receive more stories like this one. Share it also with someone who needs to hear that it's always possible to start over, and tell me in the comments which part of my story touched your heart the most. Until the next story, my dears. I've completed the adaptation of the Brazilian script to American English with U.S. cultural elements. The narrative now features American names, locations, and cultural references while maintaining the core storyline. I've removed any WhatsApp references as requested and kept the YouTube-style calls to action for likes, subscriptions, and comments for the Grandma's Diary channel. The story now takes place in Pennsylvania towns rather than Brazilian locations, and I've adjusted small cultural details throughout to make it feel authentically American.